Okay, welcome everybody, and a special welcome to people who may be here for the first time. Thank you for being here. We have a great program today. Welcome to the April meeting of Take Action San Diego. My name's Wendy Galernter. I'm the leader of this group and also your host for today. And as I mentioned, our agenda today is going to be four amazing speakers, an opportunity to ask questions of those speakers, and then a very brief section at the end with some upcoming actions and events you might be interested in. We now have 95 people here or so, and I think all of us have been asking the same question of ourselves. And that is after millions of people have shown up in the streets protesting, after judges and lawyers and universities have finally had the courage to stand up to the Trump administration. And yet, after the Trump administration continues its cruelty and its anti-democratic and lawless behavior, where do we go from now? When all of this is happening, where do we go from now? And although we don't have all the answers to that question, I think one thing is very clear, that there are people whose guidance and wisdom we really need to take heed from today. And those are the four speakers we have here today who have been at this for a long time, who have the expertise and the creative insights to really guide us. And so I'm going to show you who they are, and then we'll get started with them. Let me just share my screen again. So we'll be hearing from City Council member Sean Elo-Rivera. We'll be hearing from youth activist Matthew Quintoriano, and we will be hearing from two labor leaders, Brigette Browning from the San Diego and Imperial Counties Labor Council and Gregg Robinson. And really, without further ado, I think we're going to start with Sean Elo-Rivera right away. And many of you know Sean. He represents the city of San Diego's 9th City Council District. He's been serving there since 2020 and was the City Council president for several years. Before joining the council, Sean was an elected member of the San Diego Community College Board of Trustees. He also worked in policy and civic engagement at several local nonprofits. And he first came to San Diego to study at California Western School of Law. And I think ever since he's arrived, we've all benefited from his presence here in any number of ways. And so, Sean, thank you so much for being here today. And I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that, Wendy. Appreciate the kind words in the introduction. Apologies for being in my car. We're going from one thing to the next today, but wanted to make sure I was able to participate. So let me just start by saying thank you to everyone who's on this call, in this meeting. Wendy, thank you for your leadership in bringing this group together. This is a really important time. And we are in a really important moment. And I think, we all know that. That's why we're here. I'll just start by kind of talking to you all about how I'm thinking about the moment that we're in, and then share, what role I think I have and my colleagues who are in elected office have. So I ran for re-election this last cycle, and I woke up after election day happy to have won, but with a real sense of frustration, disappointment, anger, and sadness about the federal results, and feeling an immense sense of responsibility, knowing that was going to be in a position of leadership again, and that the local level was going to be playing an incredibly important role in the Trump 2.0 era. So I'll share with you that very quickly into that time period before Trump took office and when we knew the results. I thought about the first Trump administration and where I was, which was in the activist and organizing community, um, and what we did then that worked and what didn't work. And I very quickly began to think that I don't want this to be resistance 2.0. That while I saw a lot of merit in the goal to resist, I also found that to be exhausting, not to me personally, but to the movement. And I'm not sure that it left us at a destination that put all of us in a better place. So the two concepts that really were in my mind in the days and weeks and since then are the concept of protect and the concept of progress. And that's what's really motivating a lot of the decisions that I'm making and how I'm trying to participate in this moment. And when I say protect, I think about who and what it is that I'm trying to protect in this moment. So resistance is based on Trump and his actions and just pushing back against him. And I think that resistance is a lot different than protection. I protect the things that I love, starting with my baby, right? My baby boy, Benny. I protect him, and I protect him with a ferocity that comes from loving him and wanting him to be safe and healthy and have every opportunity that a baby should have. And I, I cannot summon the same sort of strength in a spirit of resistance as I can in a spirit of protection, because that spirit of protection comes from of loving Benny. The same is true for my wife and for my family and my neighbors and my community. And so I I hope that in our effort to not allow Trump to do what he wants to do, it's not just focused on pushing back against him, but really taking care of the people that we love. And I think that we will be stronger for that. We will build a stronger movement through that. And I'm trying to do that through community building that, quite frankly, Wendy, is a lot of it's off the record and not in front of cameras, because I don't think that that is actually the best way to protect the folks that I want to protect. It's scheming and plotting and organizing with folks in closed door settings, asking what I can do to help protect them, um, and trying to create spaces where folks can identify what resources they have, what resources are needed, and we can build stronger bonds so that we can protect more people. And so whether the issue is immigration or economic justice or the justice system, I think that if we start from a place of taking care of people, we will do that with more strength and it will be more sustainable. The second piece on progress is very important as well, because resistance doesn't necessarily move us forward. And for a lot of us who were in movement spaces the day before Trump was elected, the first time, we know that the world was not good enough then. And it certainly wasn't good enough the day that he was elected for the second time. And if it wasn't good enough then we have to be pushing for something better. And that will not just happen on its own. And so I think I recognize that in this on this call, in the streets, um, at the Hands Off rally, there were folks from all walks of life with all different levels of resources. But it is really important for us to keep in mind that we cannot simply aim to go back to the day before Trump was elected, the first time or the second time. Because if we are not intentional about that, if we do not paint the picture for the world that we are trying to build, there will be folks who would very well be part of our movement and could be part of our movement who will say, I need more than that. And they're going to say that because they need and deserve more than that. They weren't earning enough on that day. Their air wasn't healthy enough. Their rights weren't being protected. They were not safe from deportation. Their housing situation was unstable. So that world that we are trying to create, I want to encourage all of us, myself included, for us to be explicit about what that is, right? That is a world where people have the respect and dignity of a decent job that pays them enough to afford to live in the community that they love, to know that their job is safe, that they have a roof over their head, and that housing is a human right, not a commodity, that their health care is provided for, that everything that should be available to them in the world's richest society in the history of civilization is actually available to them. But we have to actually say that out loud. We have to say that out loud and talk about what that would look like, and commit to working toward that. Because if we don't, again, one, I don't think we will build as broad of a movement as we could, and two, we're selling ourselves short. So my role as an elected official is to work in partnership with the folks like you and lift up the specific goals that you've identified by working with the people that you represent or the people that you are a part of, and to be bold and not back away and not back down, not hide from the moment, not pretend like this is normal, um, and to be willing to be held accountable when I'm not meeting that moment. But I do really think that it starts from a place of being clear about what it is that's motivating us in this moment, how we are approaching this moment. And for me, again, that's with a commitment to protect my community because that comes from love. And I as cheesy as it may sound in this moment, I've seen it in my life. I've seen it in the world. I do not think that there's actually a stronger force in the world. When someone loves someone or something, they are able to break through walls. They're able to summon strength that they've never had before. There's nothing more fierce than love. And that protection comes from that place of love and I think that's very different than resistance. Our resistance is based on dislike or perhaps or dislike, disdain, maybe even hatred for Trump and everything that he stands for. And folks, that just is not as powerful as the love that we have for our community. And then that progress piece as well. What is the world that we are building toward? How committed are we to creating that world? And my job is to hear what that better world looks like for you all, and to be willing to fight for it, despite who may be opposed to it.
Thank you, Sean. And I think that really needed to be said, and maybe has been said different ways, different times, that we have to do better at saying what we're for, as much or even more than what we're against. And so I think that really echoes. I know you have another appointment to get to, but there are a few questions in the chat. Do you have a few more
Yeah,
minutes?
for sure.
Great. So what are some of the things that the are either up in city council or even outside of city government, that other than protesting in the streets, which I think everyone here is ready and raring to go to do that. But what are some of the things that that people like us can get involved in that you think exemplify what you're talking about?
Yeah. There's a few things that I'll put out there. One, a specific policy, another, um, the cycle that we're in terms of the city legislative process, and the third, a community. Um, so the first is I'm going to lift up our effort right now to raise the minimum wage. I'm sure Brigette will talk more about that when she comes up. We put forward a proposal to raise the minimum wage for folks who work in the tourism and entertainment industry to $25 an hour, which, for some of you may sound like a lot, for others it may not sound like enough, but there's a very basic principle behind that, and that is that the people who work in this city should be able to afford to live in this city. And that is especially true when they are working for corporations that make millions of dollars locally, billions of dollars globally. Um, we are committed to the idea that San Diego should work for San Diegans. This should not be a place where wealth is only extracted. It is a place where we build abundance here in our community, where people who live, work, and make our economy go can thrive. And that fight is a really, really important one because it's not just about tourism workers versus their bosses, although that's an important piece. It's about who runs San Diego and who does San Diego work for. Does it work for the establishment and the status quo? Who, folks, the party, I'm going to be very candid here. The party affiliation of the council may have shifted a lot over the last 10 years, but the same people think that they run San Diego who ran it 10 years ago and 10 years before that and 10 years before that. And that's not okay. They're savvy enough to know that they have to change the color of their hat in order to be accepted into polite spaces here in San Diego, but they haven't changed what they're about, and that is themselves and their bottom line over the health and well-being and dignity of the people who work for them. So this is a really important fight, and I just cannot stress enough how much I think it says about the future of San Diego and who runs this city. Is it the same people who've run it before, the same ultra wealthy men, or is it like a group of working class, everyday people who make San Diego run? So that's the first one. The second, we're in our budget cycle. And for all of us who've been appalled by what we see Musk and Trump doing to completely dismantle and destroy federal government, we should have equal levels of concern about how we approach local government. And that means a couple things. One, we need to resource local government well enough to do the things that it needs to do, but also the things that we might have looked to the federal government before and cannot simply rely on them. That does take resources. And that's going to be an ongoing conversation. San Diego has been operating with a structural budget deficit for a long time, largely because conservatives, radical conservatives, ran this city for a long time and did it on the lie that it doesn't cost anything to provide public service. They did that on the backs of city workers who've committed their careers to making San Diego a better place, who've chosen public service at the local level, from librarians to truck drivers to folks in the city attorney's office, to people who are working at our park and rec centers. They deserve the dignity of a decent wage. They deserve to be able to live in the city that they work for and work in, and that requires resources. But the second thing is how we approach our budget. And so we're in a budget conversation right now. The city council has received a proposed budget from the mayor, and we're engaged in that conversation. And we're going to have to make some hard decisions about how we allocate the resources that we have. And so I strongly encourage everyone who's on this call to take a look at what's been proposed and participate in the conversation. Because while it takes time to grow resources and we're trying to do some things on the fly here, we also can make some policy decisions about how we prioritize what we have to work with in this moment. And for me, that means taking care of the people who have the least. It means taking care of the folks who the city has long neglected, and being cognizant and intentional about the fact that the impacts of cuts will not be felt the same way in a well-resourced community as they will in an under-resourced community. And I hope that the people on this call will understand why it's important to prioritize those who are most vulnerable: children, seniors, etc. The third thing that I'll just name quickly, Wendy, is that we are also trying to create spaces for community to remember and realize that they're not powerless in this moment, not just to take over the streets, right, and march and protest, but to make pockets of our city the places that we want them to be. And so in our district, that means pulling together community events like community cleanups where we're painting a park, where we're planting trees, where we're doing the little things that make our little neck of the woods a better place for people to live in. We're building community as we do that, and we're also reminding ourselves that we're not powerless, that we have some autonomy in the spaces that we live in to create the world that we want, right? A place where people take care of each other, where there's trees, where there's a playground that's well cared for. And so I encourage folks to look. I mean, I'm reading the same news as you all are. I'm appalled by what's going on, and I'm speaking out. I need to continue to do that. Every time a microphone's in my face, I need to call attention to these national issues. But we can't forget about what's happening here locally, and use this moment as an opportunity to grow the movement. You don't know, you never know how participating in something like a community cleanup or showing up to an event like that, maybe the opportunity for you to start a conversation with someone who you can bring to the next Hands Off rally, who's advocating for those changes at the federal level.
You're muted.
We've been talking about uh, building smaller community events as a way to bring more people in because we really want to show up when there is a rally. We want to show up and not recognize anybody and hope that we brought in a lot of people who maybe it could be their first rally. Um, so I'm pulling from several different people, Caleb, Roxanne, and Marcia also, who have questions along similar lines, but I'll just are there progressives running for office in an upcoming elections that we should be aware of and working with besides yourself, of course?
Yeah, I appreciate that. So that is important, but I really think right now, and I'm being a little bit of a politician right now. Like I think we're very early in the cycle, and there's some work that needs to be done by candidates to like show you got to put in some work on the front end. And some people have done that. Paloma running for county supervisor, like we have to win that race, full stop. Like that is, I cannot state how important it is that Paloma wins. So, but that election's happening now, right? So let's make sure Paloma wins. But this cannot be just about like electoral politics in 2026, right? It's like, what does our city budget look like? What does our county budget look like? How do we support um, Supervisor Montgomery Stepp, Supervisor Lawson Reamer, and right now, and then eventually Supervisor Aguirre, so that they can move forward a progressive agenda at the county level, right, and take care of people. The county really it does have a charge to take care of folks with health and human services and a lot of the programs that they run. So I really hope that folks can think about what they can do to support and demand the governance that they want in this moment as well, because we sometimes make the mistake in progressive circles of not thinking about implementation and not thinking about everyday governance. And there's opportunities almost every single day. Like we're trying to move an aggressive agenda at the council. We just brought forward a policy to ban the biggest corporate landlords in the country from working together with big tech to collude via software and fix rental prices that was driving up rent thousands of dollars a month, or excuse me, a year for San Diegans. And there's fights like that we can engage at the local level. So there'll be plenty of time to win elections in 2026. What I will tell you is if we are delivering for folks in 2025 with tangible results that improve their lives, that make the cost of living cheaper, that shows them that we're pushing back against corporate greed and fighting for everyday people, the elections will be that much easier to win because they will trust that we are actually on their side. But if all we do is talk about elections down the road, I will tell you that folks, especially in the communities that I serve and represent, we're leaving ourselves very vulnerable to the cynicism of nothing's working for me, no one's fighting for me. Why should I care about the result of this election? Let's deliver for them so that they understand in real terms why we should win again.
Okay. One quick final question, and then we'll let you go on your way. But it sounds like you're telling us show up at city council meetings, show up at supervisors meetings, and make our voices heard on some of these really critical issues. And our group will certainly do our best to keep people informed of when those critical meetings are happening. But is there a way an individual what's the best way for people to keep abreast of what's going on at the city and the county level that might require our input?
Yeah, that is a good question, Woody. I mean, I will do a quick plug to follow, our social media accounts, because we do really try to make sure that the public knows about what's going on. But in addition to that, I really encourage folks to support the organizations um, that are already doing the work on the issues that you care about, right? So if you support the advancing worker justice and the dignity of workers, you should be following the San Diego and Imperial County's Labor Council, right, and their work, and the San Diego and Imperial County Building Trades. If you support uh, climate action and doing more for environmental justice, we have got nonprofits like ST350, the Climate Action Campaign and Environmental Health Coalition, and you should be plugging into their efforts. Obviously, on the civil liberties side of things and defending privacy and rights, the ACLU does an incredible job in Alliance San Diego. Um, Supporting these ongoing efforts is super, super important, and taking cues from them if you've about what they are working on and have been working on, because in many cases, these are years long efforts, and that the world that we're trying to build to, they've already talked about what they want, and we can help uplift that and support that and push efforts across the finish line. So um, you know by all means, always appreciate folks to follow our accounts so that we can lift up the issues that we're fighting for. But these organizations that have been on the ground and fighting for years and sometimes decades for the issues that you care about, plug into their efforts, because they can definitely use them. The last thing I will say, Wendy, I'll do a quick plug. The Working Families Party, California Working Families Party. If you support progressive politicians and want more like true progressive champions in office, the Working Families Party is really important. It's not separate. It's not a competitor to the Democratic Party. What it is meant to do is provide a space, a political home for true progressives to come together, to work together, and win elections so that we can win for everyday people. I'm a Democrat and I'm a Working Families Party member, and you can be both. You can be one or the other. But I strongly encourage you all to become a member of the Working Families Party, because it is a way to lift up and provide infrastructure and support to true progressive champions. Um, and I think that's super important.
Well, thank you so much for setting the stage for what I think is going to be a very great discussion. I'm sorry you can't stay the whole time, but I know you got a few things you got to take care of. But we will definitely take your recommendations. We'll follow. We'll provide all of the links and information that you provided, and we will see you at the next city council meeting, hopefully, too.
Thank you, Wendy. Thanks for having me. Thank you, everyone, for being on here. I will be listening in. I really appreciate the invitation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right. So our next speaker is Matthew Quintoriano. I hope I'm saying that right, Matthew. Okay, good. He is a student at San Diego High School, where he founded his school's mock trial club. He's a founding member of the school newspaper and also the school garden club. He formerly served 2 terms on the San Diego Unified School Board, representing almost 100,000 students in the city. He now works for an organization called Wellfy, which is a startup that builds tools to help mental health workers dismantle systemic prejudice. He also has given a fantastic TED Talk, which I would urge all of you to watch. It's about 10 minutes, and we'll put the link to that TED Talk in the chat, and I'll also put it in our follow-up email. And I can't think of a better person to talk to us about how youth and youth organizations are involved in this fight, this struggle, this movement that we're also dedicated to. So take it away, Matthew.
Thank you so much. I That was a very thorough bio. I will say I don't think anyone has mentioned that's my garden club and mock trial. So I appreciate the research. It's just yeah. Thank you so much for the bio. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you all so much for being here. It is a Saturday afternoon. I'm having a lot of fun on my Saturday afternoon. I hope you are too. And I think I want to get like a couple of like big things out of the way before I start. I think, I guess the big question is like, what's going on with young people? And I want to preface this with a couple of things. One is that young people are not a monolith, right? So I want you to think about like, for example, there's actually really surprising statistics. You could think about in the last election, Donald Trump saw a lot of big gains in a lot of white young men. And so in that way, it's like, okay, is this idea of like young people a monolith? And the answer is no, because you see also people being radicalized across the spectrum. But there are a couple of things that I really want to highlight. But I know there's time for questions later. One of the things that I want to talk about is like the radicalization of young people. And I don't say this, I guess radicalization has a little bit of a negative tone, but I guess for context, I want you to think about like um, I want you to think about the idea you have of like the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. And I think all of you have seen throughout elections and throughout actions and throughout all these different things, you have seen so much about like what the Democratic and Republican Party is. And I and a lot of young people, I'm talking when I take young people, I'm saying people that are 18 through 20, maybe have voted in the last election, but that's kind of about it. Um, we've seen the Democratic and Republican Party, but for a lot of us, we were in fourth through sixth grade when Trump was first elected. We were in kindergarten during the second Obama term. And so when we think about that context, I honestly genuinely do not remember Obama's second term. And so time and time again, right? In 2020, in 2016, kind of in 2020, and in 2024, we have consistently seen the Democratic Party fail to stand up to Trump. And we have seen the Republican Party be the Republican Party, right? Do all these horrendous things that we don't particularly love. And so I think a lot of young people are really disillusioned with the parties that we have right now and the organizations that we have right now. One of the big things that I think about is like climate change, for example. It is a big existential, threat that a lot of young people kind of have. And also, it's like, it's something that people have been compromising on. And I think climate change is this great example of like, it's really not going to affect the way that the world, if we continue to ignore it, it's not really going to affect the way the world runs within the next, 5, 10 years. But when we're talking about 20 or 40 years, it's a lot, right? And so I think a lot of young people are really disillusioned about what's happening with the Democratic and Republican Party. And I also think that gives us, for a lot of more left-leaning spaces, I think that gives us a lot more opportunity, right, to enrapture a lot of these young people. I think about like to say that like, hey, these things that you really care about, these things that are happening, like we are willing to not be wishy-washy about it. We are not willing to make strange compromises like have been throughout the last years that we've seen. A lot of young people haven't seen a cohesive, coherent, effective Democratic Party take good action and leadership through the left. And I think that's where we can fit in throughout the Democratic Party establishment, creating spaces for more left-leaning spaces that really do attract young people to these spaces. And outside of the Democratic Party, one of the and I think that speaks to another thing about hope. And one of the things that I've heard time and time again when I'm in a whole bunch of different spaces, I remember I had this epiphany when I was helping write a piece of legislation for a former senator, Senator Butler. And I remember at the very end, we were thinking, all right, Senator, what gives you hope? And the answer that she gave was young people, people like me that care about the things that are in this world. And I remember my number one thought being, a senator believes in me? That's a lot of pressure, guys. I'm just a kid trying to figure out how this world works, okay? I don't really know what's going on. But I think that speaks to like, people have a lot of hope in young people. It is a lot of pressure on us, but I also think it's something that you can do yourself. And it's because young people, we don't have a large body of experiences, right? We don't have the lived experience of going through things like the 2008 financial crisis, and so many like pieces that have fitted together to form your experiences. And so instead, what we do is we take specific people or specific ideas, and we really try and rally and find hope around those. We find people like Bernie or AOC, and you think about the Bernie movement 2016, that was a moment where a bunch of young people like saw this figure and was like, hey, this is a real bright spot in a really dark time. And so young people, in a kind of a way, have really only lived in this dark time. And so we're forced to pay attention to those bright spots. And so I feel like that's how you have hope in one of these very, very dark times. It's that you find those bright spots. Sean is one of them, one of my bright spots that, like, okay, wow, local governance really can do some really cool things. Finding those bright spots and trying to be those bright spots for the other people around you so that they can look at you and say, hey, I actually do have hope in the future. Because it's not just a young people thing. I think everybody can do it. I mean, with all due respect to Bernie Sanders, I don't think he's a young person. And still, he's still inspiring hope into so many people. And I think you can be one of those really bright spots if you really try. And I want to talk lastly about like the greater social movements of young people. And I think it's that they're very fractured and they're very grassroots. I think I think the reality of social media is that things build traction very easily and things lose traction very easily. And that's just kind of how life works in this kind of new age media. Young people are doing the things that they can to build the future that they want. And also, a lot of young people are still trying to envision the future that they want, right? We've only been thinking about the future for a few number of years in the grand scheme of things. I mean, it's a large portion of our life, like percentage wise, but it's only been 5, 10 years since, we actually started like having really coherent thoughts. And so I think we're still very much speaking in draft, but we have really strong and we have really strong feelings and passion, and we're still building out this vision. There are some really, really cool organizations that are just like literally just like doing things because they can. I think about a lot about like Youth v. Oil and San Diego 350. And like, I think about those organizations and I think they're great examples of like, we're just doing things. The last thing that I want to say is that part of you might want to focus on my age and part of you might want to focus on like the age of all of these like youth organizations. And I think they're really powerful. And I think there's a level deeper to that. Focusing on my age a little bit kind of misses the reality of the story. And the reality of the story is, and you could please watch my TED Talk because I will give a much better description of this. But whenever we tackle an issue, we put together a mental puzzle of what it looks like. Adults, legislators, whatever. And too often there's a missing piece, and that is young people. And that analogy, what it says is that it's not just young people on their own. A single puzzle piece isn't going to do anything. But also, if you have the entire puzzle piece, but you're missing one, then it's no longer a puzzle, right? You need everything to be around it. And you need each puzzle piece to be supported by the other puzzle pieces around it. I've seen a lot of youth organizations fail because they are just youth organizations and they don't have the outside support of the adults and the lived experts around them with their doctorates and their theories, and that are really important. And we need both. We need both pieces to create that full picture and really make effective change. So I know I've spoken a lot, and I see that there are some questions. So I'll stop it there, but feel free to ask me anything.
Thank you so much, Matthew, for your wisdom and just for being here to inspire all of us. I'm just looking through some questions, and I think, yeah, Yvonne is saying, how can we support you and some of the other key youth organizations?
I hate to be that guy. Like, I know that all of you are hearing this all the time, but donate. I know everyone in the world is asking for your money, and I am honestly genuinely so sorry from my soul from the number of emails you must be getting to donate. But what happens a lot in youth organizations is people really like to support young people, like in spirit and stuff. And we love that. Truly, we do. And it's also like we are fighting against people that simply have more money. And that goes across the entire spectrum of the left. But specifically with young people, we are doing this out of the passion of our hearts and our fear for the future. And neither of those things pay particularly phenomenally, especially in the especially in the nonprofit and the political space. The reality of fighting traditional institutions that don't really support young people in that way is that we can't do some of the things that we really want to do. One of the biggest things that I think about is um, like when I visit, it's such a great opportunity to go physically to a space, because that is a place where you can, like, if you go to a legislature building in Sacramento or in DC or wherever you are, or maybe even city council, right? If you go to one of those places, you feel immersed because a lot of political education, actually, we'll get to political action in a second, but like there's so many opportunities that are available for development of young people to just like go to the building and do something in these buildings, speak to their legislatures in Sacramento and DC. And I think it also speaks to like their legislators about how important this is that they were willing to come to their place. The other piece that I think about is political education. Please, please, please fight against the watering down of a lot of political education curriculum. And if you have children, be clear and don't be afraid to have these really hard conversations about race and prejudice and all these like really, really powerful like conversations and things that need to happen. Because if you don't have those conversations, then you get people that are in like these manosphere, Andrew Tate kind of things. Like if you don't have those hard conversations with your kids, who knows where they're going to get it elsewhere. That also speaks for like schools, like be really diligent in talking about like what you want your kid to learn with your teachers and your school board members, because if you're not going to be that person advocating for teachings about slavery and the civil rights movement, like then someone else is going to, and you, I don't know if you really trust that other person to have that same level of diligence and care that you do. um the last piece that I just remembered with the financial need thing is contributing to a lot of contributing financially to a lot of youth groups is that there is a barrier of financial ability of a lot of these organizations, where what happens is those that are involved in activism are those that traditionally have more income and privilege in our society, right? The communities that have the most ability to give, both financially and time wise, get the most. And that happens across the entire spectrum, and especially happens with young people. A lot of communities, especially in Southeast San Diego, and the areas that are traditionally marginalized, don't have a level of financial support with their youth presence, and they might not have the same opportunities because it's a growth opportunity for our greater community. It's a growth opportunity for the student, and in that way, you can help bridge that gap to make some of these things possible. And these could look like scholarships. These could look like donations to organizations. These could look like advocating for your political party. It could look all sorts of these things.
Hey. And one final question from Caleb. Are there some national youth organizations or local youth organizations that you feel are doing a particularly good job right now?
I feel are doing a particularly good job. Yes. Youth v Oil. I know like some of my best friends work at that organization. They're very specifically geared toward climate change, and it's something that a lot of us really care about because, well, I kind of would like to be able to, you know, breathe air well, not have asthma, in the next 40 years. Um, I think, um, I think there are organizations that are doing a very good job of in the national. I'm trying to think of the national space. I think there's organizations that are doing a really good job, like the ACLU. Does a very good job of supporting young people. I think about in just in UCSD actually. Oh my God, how did it take me so long to remember them? Our Time to Act United. I think they changed their name, but it's Our Time to Act United, and they do a phenomenal job of doing everything from housing justice to climate justice to um, gun violence reform. One of my friends started an organization called Youth for Juvenile Justice Reform. They're very local in San Diego, and they focus on interviewing young people or interviewing incarcerated people, formerly incarcerated people. Um, there are so many across San Diego. Yes, Mid City can. People know these things if we get them to start talking. And I just think like nationwide, it's hard because it's hard to organize nationwide because that requires a lot of time and requires a lot of money. And again, that's not something that a lot of youth organizations typically have. There are a lot of really big gun violence reform ones, but all of them revolve around specific issues. Because again, young people aren't a monolith. We focus on we are important and we don't all think the same. And that's good. That's part of it. But yeah, for specifically in San Diego, I really encourage you to contribute to our Time to Act. Encourage you to youth Mid-City Can. I will say there's an organization that I work for called Rhizome. We are very new, and we are a grassroots organization focused on civic engagement and empowerment of young people. We do all sorts of things. And of course, I have to plug the Working Families Party because I sit on their steering committee. And we do all sorts of amazing things. We are in not opposition to the Democratic Party. We are a political home for progressives that need some place to go if they feel alienated by the current two-party system. So, yeah.
Excellent. And there's a number of people are adding to that list here in the chat if you're keeping an eye on it. Center for Policy Initiatives, the AFT Guild Internship Project. Yeah, and we will include all of those in our follow-up email. So, Matthew, you do give us all hope. Just like the senator said to you, you certainly give me hope. And so appreciate the work you're doing and you're spending time with us here today. And we'll continue to work together.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much. Okay. And our last, but certainly not least, two speakers are going to be talking about the pivotal role of the labor movement in our movement. And we're going to start with Brigette Browning, who many of you know is the executive secretary of the San Diego and Imperial Counties Labor Council, representing about 200,000 working families that range from teachers to nurses to domestic workers and much more. And she is also the president of Unite Here Local 30, which is the hotel and food service workers, which I learned from the internet doubled in size under your leadership. And Brigette was born in San Diego and raised in San Diego. And interesting fact, has degrees in chemistry and Spanish literature, which someday will be interesting to talk to you about. Those are two great topics. And so I will turn things over to you, Brigette. Thank you and welcome.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I assume that most of you don't know what the Labor Council is, because even some of our own union members don't know what it is. But we're basically the union of all the unions. We herd the cats to try to get them to move in the same direction, which really isn't easy, because on one side of the spectrum, we have the teachers who are very progressive and very militant. And on the other side, we even have some law enforcement in our council. So to get all of those folks to move in the same direction is not an easy thing. I would say for me, what I think is really inspiring and which I hope we can move to are more and more strikes. And I know you've been really helpful, Wendy, to get us to get help for the UCSD strikes that are happening on May 1st. And that's really important, because when strikers feel like there's outside support, it really gives them a lot of energy and excitement to take on the boss. When I started in our movement, striking was very rare, because under Ronald Reagan, when he had locked out the PATCO workers, the strike ended abysmally. And I think workers were very afraid, and union leaders were very afraid. And we almost completely abandoned strikes as a weapon against capitalism. And I think what we're really experiencing right now is a rebuke of capitalism. Now, we all know Donald Trump is a charlatan, and he's not going to fix anything for working class people. But I would say that nationally, I don't feel like we were speaking to them in a way that they felt that their needs were being addressed. Like, I felt like the Harris campaign was very tone deaf. And I spoke to a lot of our members who voted for Trump, and many of them were Mexican immigrants. And it kind of like, it really blew my mind that they would even consider voting for him. But she came across as very comfortable and not understanding what it's like to worry about how you're going to pay your rent and your groceries and take care of your family. And we can all talk about how that happened. And probably if we'd had a robust primary, we would have had a different candidate and we could have had a different outcome, but that's not what happened. I think the vast majority of the voters that voted for Trump is because they don't feel like there's a future for them in our current economic system. And it's not just because we've allowed capitalism on steroids to make billionaires. It probably won't be long before we see trillionaires while we're creating poverty jobs. It's also because the labor movement has eroded vastly over this time period. Every year that I've been in this movement, we represent less and less workers in the workspace. And there's been gains on the public sector, but even though we've been able to gain in the public sector, we've lost so much in the private sector that workers don't actually feel the power of the unions. And I kind of want to explain that. So I don't know if you all saw, it was on the news a lot. We were on strike for 38 days at the Hilton Bayfront. One of the most transformative experiences of my life. We won a contract that the lowest paid workers at the Hilton are going to be paid $34 an hour, which I'm super proud of. And it includes full family health care and a pension plan. What happens in an environment where you have a robust union is that once we get that contract, all of the non-union hotels start paying the same because they don't want those workers to join the union. And so you create this upwards pressure, which puts money in the pockets of everyday workers who are spending money in our communities instead of sending it to shareholders back in Bethesda, Maryland, where a lot of the hotel companies are headquartered. But if you don't have the unions pushing up the wages and the benefits, then all you have is the bosses pushing it further and further down. And I think one of the reasons that young men in particular gravitated towards Trump is, like, my son's going to turn 24 this year. All of his friends still live at home. You know, even though they have decent jobs, they all still live at home. And I think it's not a very hopeful experience if you can't even figure out how to create your own home and your own family. You have to stay with your parents to be able to survive. And maybe the option is to move to another state, but I want to create an environment where my son can live next to me, and my grandkids, if I ever have them, I could see them because they live close to me. And so I think housing is such a huge piece of this. And honestly, I think part of the problem is our own creation. One, we took the primary system and we made it top two. And frankly, that benefits moderate Democrats. I understand why we did it because the Republicans were winning everything. But I actually think it's made our electeds much weaker because you're getting these mediocre, middle of the road folks that are actually winning in the top two. Because if you have a radical person like Sean, who I agree, Sean is amazing. But if he's running against a moderate, all the Republicans are going to vote for the moderate, not Sean. And so Sean will lose. I'm just using Sean as an example. I hope that never happens to Sean. But I've seen that happen. So I think the top two is a very big problem. And I think term limits are a problem because electeds are constantly worried about what their next election is going to be. And so they won't take hard choices. They won't fight for controversial things. I mean, I don't know if y'all have been to downtown lately, but every time I go there, it seems like it's worse and worse. The place is falling apart. But because our electeds are are running for this office or that office. Like every vote they take is based on how that's going to play in their next election. Well, basically, our city infrastructure is crumbling around us. And just if you think about tourism being our second biggest economic generator, at some point, tourists are not going to want to come here because it smells terrible. It smells like pee. The buildings are not in good condition. It's not clean. And I just feel like it's like ostriches with their head in the sand. Like, let's pretend it's not happening. And I think voters like about Trump is that he'll say things that no one else will say. I'm not saying that I agree with the stuff he says, the shit salad that comes out of his mouth. I don't agree with any of it. But at least he talks about it instead of pretending like everything is great and there's no problems and just vote for me again to keep the status quo. When workers are saying like the status quo is not working for us, like we need to change what the status quo looks like. I think we need to figure out social housing. I'm not an expert on it. I would fully support it. I think if you only talk about low income housing, I think it really alienates a vast majority of the population who, if they're not supporting it, it's not going to happen. But if you talk to them in the context, well, don't you want your kids to be able to live in your neighborhood? Don't you want your teachers to be able to live in your neighborhood? Then they feel like, oh, that policy is for me, so I can support it. I know it shouldn't be that way. I know that we should be like altruistic and care about everybody. And I legitimately do, but I don't think most voters do. Like, I think you have to have a tie-in for people to support new taxes. Like, I think they would need to see a real benefit. I think it would be hard to do just city by city. Like, and frankly, I don't see Gavin Newsom like doing anything that benefits working people. Like, he only cares about tech bros. And I honestly, I hope Kamala is not our next governor because it'll be the same story. Like, we really need somebody. If we're the fourth biggest economy in the world, I don't understand how, if we don't have real leadership, we couldn't figure out how to create housing for young people and for workers and for low income, all in the same building, and have it be a nice building where people actually want to live. Like, to me, that doesn't seem like it should be so hard. But if there's no political will to do it, I don't see it happening. And if we just keep electing moderates, it's certainly not going to happen. I hope that we move to a general strike. I'm out there, though. Like, Gregg is with me, but I don't think that most of the labor movement is with me. When I say this stuff, they look at me like I'm crazy. But we control the production of the capital. I think people forget about that. Like, it was never more clear to me than at the Hilton when I saw managers in suits pushing the dumpster out to the dumpster truck to get the trash dumped. Like, we forget that without us, they can't make money. And we need to disrupt the economy to rebuild it in a way that protects workers and that gives young people a future so that they don't have to move for some godforsaken state with horrible politics just so that they can afford a house. So I hope we move up to a general strike. I'm going to keep pressing for it. I'm not sure if it's going to happen, but that's where I think we should go. And I really appreciate your support. I just want to remind y'all, UC has this reputation of being this benevolent organization that, has done great things for so many Californians. And it has. I mean, I went there. I got a first-rate education. But it's also a corporation where the chancellors make millions of dollars and live in mansions, and they're paying the people that work there pitiful wages where they can't even afford to pay their rent. So everything that's happening in the private sector is happening at UC. So your support on Monday for the May 1st march really means a lot to us. And we've got a lot of signups, and I can't wait to see you all there. And I will turn it over to Gregg.
Thanks. I guess I'm the last guy and the oldest guy on this panel. I've been around in progressive politics basically since God was a kid. And I don't know if you folks get the importance of what you've just heard from Brigette. I have been around for many progressive politics. I go back to the 1960s, frankly. And I remember the protest movements from that period of time in which organized labor wasn't there with us. With Brigette and what's happening in organized labor, this is a huge momentous change. And that is something that we should all look on as a real positive and a major contribution to what's the battle before us. I don't know about you, but when I hear this stuff coming out of the White House these days, I keep thinking, boy, that sure sounded better in the original German. That used to be a joke, but we're no longer joking about that. We are facing authoritarianism in this country. We've got to be able to push back against that and push back effectively. And in essence, one of the things that really scare me these days is jellyfish. No, not the ones in the ocean, but the ones in politics. Those are the folks that lack backbone to stand up against what's taking place in this country right now. And a curious irony for me, honestly, I think I got depressed when this happened. I got depressed when Trump was elected again, and even more depressed to see what he's actually doing. But there's really an incredible honor to be able to stand up right now against what's taking place. We have the privilege not merely to fight against a single president. We're not even just fighting for the future of youth politics or even the labor movement. We are fighting through to protect the basic democracy of this country. And the resources that labor can offer at this point in time, I think, are absolutely crucial. Labor, as Brigette has said around in demonstrations, we've, now speaking as a protester who's been in the streets, we've got a little pigment problem in terms of some of the folks who are showing up. It's an awful lot of us are white folks. And Brigette has talked and said, look, labor can help speak to working class people of every ethnicity and bring those people out into the streets. We need everybody into the streets. We need a movement that reflects the broad complexion, literally and figuratively, of this country, particularly the ability to speak to working class people. If you take anything attention to the failures of what in this last election of the Democratic Party, it was that ability to speak to and for working class people, to have a sense that people are on their side. The union movement can provide that. Leaders like Brigette can provide that. When you hear a leader in San Diego of the labor movement talking about a general strike, talking about the issues of the low income and immigrant communities, you've seen a leader that you have not seen in this community for, honestly, since FDR. And remember, I'll take one last point and I will conclude. People now see FDR as this embodiment of progressive politics. And honestly, FDR was only FDR because of people in the streets and particularly the labor movement. There's that line, the apocryphal story about A. Philip Randolph, who led the Brotherhood of Sleeping Porter unions, who got in to talk to him about efforts to be done, the commitment to the civil rights of that period of time. And FDR turned to him and said, okay, you've convinced me. Now go out and make me do it. The labor movement and people in the streets and all of us together can make them do it, can make these politicians find the backbone that so far so many of them have been lacking. Sean, Paloma are exceptions. And even these people, let me be quite frank, these are good people, but it's not enough to elect good people. You got to keep them good once they get into office. You've got to keep them with that backbone, and that is people in the streets, people with the resources, people like the labor movement who can keep pushing and knowing that the labor movement will show up over and over again and has the resources to make sure that someone like a Paloma gets elected. It was the labor movement in many ways that provided the backbone of that movement. The labor movement is good at helping these politicians find that backbone and teaching them, if they can't find it, we'll teach them Darwin and how to evolve those backbones over time. So this is what the labor movement can do, and we should all be grateful for a leader like Brigette Browning. Oh, I'm done. Okay.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Gregg. Thank you, Brigette. I didn't get to properly introduce Gregg to all of you. He is also a labor leader. He's an AFT guild, but he's also a lifelong educator who's taught everything from K through 12 to community college to university students. And he's also the president of the San Diego County Board of Education. So thank you both. And I think if you just scan down the chat, you'll see that people have really taken to heart what you have to say. You certainly created some good conversations about the general strike or about the idea of a general strike. I think it's something that everyone is really interested in, and then at the same time concerned that if something like that's going to happen, it should be successful, which of course I know is your guys' concern too. So since there were a number of questions about the general strike, do you see, either of you, do you see this as something that would be happening with national coordination, or could it be a San Diego thing that then other municipalities and states would follow?
So if you watched what happened when the teachers did the wildcat strikes during the March for Ed stuff, it came from the rank and file members. It didn't come from the leadership of the union. I don't think this would come from the leadership of the unions because they have in their contracts that they're not allowed to do economic action in the middle of the contract. And so if the union were to be pushing for it during mid-contract, basically the bosses could sue them for damages and bankrupt them. So I think it would have to be, I don't know if y'all remember, I'm sure Matthew doesn't, but when there was the move to do the day without an immigrant in the 90s, remember? And it just kind of, it was catching on and it was building its own momentum. I almost think it has to be like that, like an organic movement that's coming from the workers themselves rather than it's certainly not going to come from Liz Schuler. Let me tell you, that's not going to happen. Like, I think we've got to put the idea in the workers' minds so that they can start creating the momentum for it, is my thought. I don't know if you have a different thought than I do, Gregg.
No, I agree. I think the other side of that is what's being proposed by people like Shawn Fain. That is to coordinate our contracts so they all come due at the same time. That's another alternative, which could also then you do have that ability to legally go on strike. This is not a secondary boycott. There's legal limits on the ability to go on strike on something that's not your immediate economic interest. Secondary boycotts are supposed to be illegal. But at that point, you could coordinate those kinds of contracts all coming into place. And my union, AFT, did make the commitment to try and coordinate our contracts around that. So, yeah, I think, honestly, I agree with you, Brigette. Movements arise from the interior. They arrive from people who really have that gut level commitment. And we know, like any other bureaucracy, labor movements, the labor has its bureaucrats who are there largely because of their positions. But I think there is, not just you, Brigette, but the airline workers union, AFA, and those kind of people. We've seen it in the Shawn Fain and the UAW. There is that kind of internal momentum to produce a general strike or local actions. I think at this point, we just don't know exactly how that's going to take place, but we know there's a huge discontent amongst working people. And if we can get that channeled in ways, if we can give them a sense of their own empowerment, let's see what comes out of that. So yeah, general strike. I love that idea. Let's see what comes.
Well, I think it it's clear to me that, as much as the progressive movement and the labor movement have had goals and interests similar and overlapping for many years, in San Diego, we haven't necessarily really worked together closely. And I think that the time, if we're not going to do that now, then shame on us. So I think part of having you guys here is to get our group educated and informed and also just motivated to do what we can. And I'll talk in a second and give links to participate in the May Day rally that's happening on Thursday. If there are other ways that our group can support the striking workers at UCSD, please let us know. And I know some of those ways, but please let us know either with follow-up emails or put some information in the chat. And if there are other ways short term, other than the next big rally, when I think we want to pull even more people and a more diverse community into that big rally, and it looks like there may be a big National Day of Action in the middle of June sometime, not totally set in stone yet, but we want to make sure that workers are better represented, not just here in San Diego, but nationally. So if there are other ways that you would like to add to that on how we can make linkages and really strengthen the ties between our group and the Indivisibles and the activist democratic clubs, of which there are many, and then many not. But if we can strengthen those ties with labor, I think this is what everybody really wants. So
there's a few things, just picking up on a couple of the things Sean was talking about. And the budget's bad this year, but next year it's going to be even worse because Trump is destroying the stock market, which means the pensions are going to be severely underfunded. And so all of our public institutions, from the schools to the city to the county, are going to be extremely impacted by what's happening with the stock market. What the city is proposing to do is to go into austerity instead of trying to figure out new ways to raise revenue. So we might as well have Kevin Faulconer in charge, because that's what he would have done. The hoteliers literally sit on $50 million a year that they decide how to spend it themselves, and they spend it on their own pet projects. I'll give you an example. Bill Evans pays for his antique car show, which does nothing for bringing money into our city. It's his own pet project because he's a little man like Trump and needs to prove himself with his stupid antique cars. If you remember when Bob Filner was the mayor for that very short time, he refused to sign the check for them to get their $50 million. And he was creating leverage to negotiate with them to get more of it for the city. Unfortunately, he imploded. We all know how that happened. But the city's leadership could do that now and is choosing not to, which I don't understand. Why do you want billionaire hoteliers to have $50 million when you're closing rec centers in communities where kids don't have other alternatives? Like, it makes no sense to me. So I do think pushing on them. Also, I don't know if you all know, but Petco Park, the city owns half of it, but they don't get half of the revenue. The vast majority of the revenue goes to the Padres. And if you all think the Padres are poor, I would like to sit down with you and talk to you for quite a long time, because the Padres are doing really well. And I think if the city came after the Padres and said, okay, it's time for you to pony up, bro. Like, you need to help us fix downtown. Like, they could run a publicity campaign that would shame them so that they would give more of the profits to the city. But for some reason, because these people have always had the money and the power, it's like, oh, we can't do that. We don't want to whack the hornet's nest. If we were ever going to whack the hornet's nest, right now is the time to do that. And a lot of times what happens in these budget hearings, because workers are working and they can't come down to testify, is you get the same people who are supporting the status quo dominating the conversation. So I think you all being involved in the budget conversations is really important, because we need to decide, are we here for everyday people or are we here for billionaires? I think the billionaires have been doing pretty well. Like, I don't think we need to continually prop them up. I think if Bill Evans wants a car show, he should pay for himself. And then I will let you know when the minimum wage is going to get docketed. We expect it to be docketed in the summer. It's basically the same people that I'm talking about who make, the general managers that are making $700,000, $800,000 a year come down and say how they can't afford to pay people $25 an hour. It's the most hypocritical thing I've ever seen in my life. And so it would be great to have folks down there to testify in support of a minimum wage, because when our hospitality workers get money in their pocket, they spend it in our communities. It has ripple effects. It lifts up the entire community. And so I think it would be a good way for you to stand with us.
Absolutely. Yes. I think we're going to get used to going to those council meetings and those supervisor meetings. And I know there's even a few people here who are not from San Diego or even California, but I think the advice applies everywhere, actually.
And just one last thing on that, in terms of showing up, please think about showing up at school boards right now. I mean, I know this is down ballot stuff, but we have some very vulnerable children in our communities that are under attack, and showing up can help put backbone in some of our school boards as well to try and protect these kids.
Or running for some of these boards.
Yep.
Especially like in East County, like we can't even recruit people to run. Like there's races where we would help people, like prep them and spend money on them. But if we can't get good people to run, we're not going to do that. And some of it, like the water board, the school boards, there's all sorts of boards and commissions that we don't even run people for. And so that's why the Republicans dominate them.
Yeah. And if you hate Trump, you should see what goes on in school boards like Grossmont High School. They make Trump, and some of these guys make Trump look like Gandhi. So if you really hate Trump, here's a place you can go and really yell at a Trump in ways you can't on TV.
You're quite a salesman. Well, thank you both so much for everything you do, for being here, for giving us these good ideas. We will definitely follow up. And just thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to take 3 minutes now just to talk about some upcoming events and actions, and then we're going to close out so that everyone can have a good Saturday evening and then get back to work and keep on doing what everyone's doing.